Hello, everyone. This is a Walk for Change interview. Walk, the number 4, change.us. Empowering people for human rights. This is a very important action movement that we are involved in. We're going to walk across the country. We're going to write legislation, present policy positions, educate people, and create a path for you to bring about the best changes in your life and in your community and with your local, state, federal government. Why you walk for change is just as important as why I walk for change, why anyone walks for change. We are a little tired of the way things are and the oppressive nature of the behavior of our governments on our freedoms and liberties in a number of areas: homelessness, veterans, prohibition, medical care. And this is not partisan, political. I'm actually probably the most anti-partisan person you'll ever meet. The walk is about people. It's about empowering people for human rights. It's about the community. And today, I am really pleased. I have a friend coming on who I've known for a number of years, who's a fierce advocate. He's also a doctor, psychiatrist, actually. His name is Dr. David Rabin, and he's going to be joining us. And we're going to be doing a series of discussions on a number of areas that are important in the medical community. First of all, it is always important for the Walk for Change to present good, proper, vetted, professional information when it comes to medical care in a number of areas. Cannabis, psilocybin, MDMA, also CBD, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and wearables, and the Apollo Neuro, which was created by David and his team, for example. So we're going to be covering a number of subjects. And today, we're going to talk about CBD. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to Dr. David Rabin. David, very, very nice to see you as always. It's been a minute. And thank you for joining me today. And I was just telling the audience about our goals of education that we have coming up. We're going to talk about a number of subjects over the next few months. And first of all, how you doing?
Great, thanks, Bobby. It's great to see you too.
Yeah, it's been a minute, and we drop in on each other's lives and say hi every now and then, which is great. You know, we're trying to stay in touch, and I know you have a lot of busy things going on, and you are in the West Coast these days, if I understand correctly.
Yes. Fantastic. Yeah, we're in Monterey.
Nice. Well, it's a great place to be, that's for sure. Monterey's, I haven't been there in a minute, but I imagine it still remains beautiful.
It is. We are very lucky to be here.
Fantastic. So we are going to talk about CBD, and just as a preamble here, because David is well versed in this subject, I know personally. You know, one of the things that has been bothering me personally and the people that I work with is the FDA's position on CBD is one of the reasons why we want to talk about this. But just CBD in general, you know, what are the benefits of it? Why it works? You know, what's the whole point, I guess? You know, where did this come from? You know, why is it suddenly popular? Those things. So first of all, David, tell us a little bit about who you are and why we should listen to
you. Thank you for having me again. I really appreciate it. We've been talking about doing this for a long time, and it's great to be here with you to talk about something that's, you know, extremely controversial because there's a lot of incorrect knowledge about CBD out there, and a lot of bad products as well. And I think that we're all victim to that if we don't arm ourselves with the knowledge available and the truth about CBD and THC and cannabinoids in general, of which there are estimated to be maybe over 400 different cannabinoids, right? CBD just being one of them, cannabidiol. And so cannabidiol is interesting in particular because it is, oh, and I should introduce myself. I'm Dr. David Rabin, and I'm a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist. I have been studying chronic stress and the effects of stress over time and aging in the body and inflammation for about 14 years or so now. And starting with cellular and molecular aging, looking with human neurons and human neural stem cells in culture, as well as cells in the back of the eye in culture, and looking at the way those cells respond to stress. And then I went into training as a psychiatrist because I was really interested in looking at evaluating the way our whole bodies deal with stress. Because as much as I would love to be able to just fix your brain and have you be better, or fix your eye and have you be better, oftentimes what happens is I fix your brain and your eye and your life gets somewhat better. And that's really great. It's fantastic. But I can't fix other things in your life, like your financial problems and your emotional problems and your mental health problems. And the resources to fix those are just not as readily available in a lot of areas of medicine. I mean, we definitely should not get into this, but insurance companies do not cover, and oftentimes don't fully cover, mental health, which is a shame. And so I really was fascinated by the study of consciousness and how these different medicines, particularly natural medicines like cannabidiol, THC, and cannabinoids, and also psychedelic medicines, affect the body and change the way that we feel, change the way that we see ourselves and the way we extract meaning from our environment, as a way to better understand consciousness and better understand reality and the way that we achieve fulfilling life from reality. Ideally, the fullest, most full, most complete version of each of us. How do we each get there? And that always has been something that's really interesting to me for many reasons. And most people, I think, deep down, when you ask themselves, you ask yourself, is that something that you might find interesting? Most people will say, yeah, it's pretty interesting to think about how we could be our best selves, especially when you don't know what your best self actually is. And so we started understanding that better through doing research on psychedelics, of which I'm a part of with MAPS, and to help organize one of the largest psychedelic studies of how psychedelic psychotherapy works, comparing MDMA to some other psychedelic medicines, and then also looking at things like cannabinoids. So CBD is really interesting because CBD is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid. It doesn't change our perception really of the world or ourselves, and it doesn't really change our thinking. And it can be slightly stimulating or slightly relaxing depending on which terpenes or which flavors go along with it. And so that's one thing that a lot of people commonly don't understand is the combination. Cannabis is so important. It's everything in cannabis is about the entourage effect. It's about the main ingredient, and then it's about the 399 or more other side ingredients that accompany that main ingredient to give it the full effect, right? Speaking of, this idea of the full potential. When you remove parts of that through the consumption process or through the process of making a medicine, then you're removing some of the parts of that medicine that heal. And so the goal, I think, of us as doctors and providers is to figure out ways to tap into using plant medicine, and using all the resources that we have available to us, including Western medicine, to provide the best healing for the most people with the least amount of risk. And so to try to bring that to the world, I've created an organization that I co-founded with a number of other physician experts in their field, as well as scientists and people who are just really passionate experts in their particular areas of medicine or science, and cannabis science being one of those areas, to help basically show to the world that we understand how to safely use most plant medicines, and that we as a group of doctors, and this organization is called the Board of Medicine, and you can find us at boardofmedicine.org. We are a nonprofit that supports and provides information that is peer-reviewed and evidence-based by doctors and by scientists to the world about how to safely use plant medicine. We're starting with cannabis and CBD, and then expanding out from there into psychedelic medicine, and sort of just trying to help everyone along with the process of, hey, let's get to know the stuff that we put into our bodies and what's available to us as resources. And the people who should know the most about that are doctors. And right now, part of the reason healthcare is suffering so much is because doctors are not easily caught up on a lot of the new research because there's so much and they can't go through it all. They're too tired. So there's a big gap in knowledge between what we were taught in medical school and residency training and what is the current state of research and how to apply that into people's lives. So
that's one of the highlights I want to touch upon with you over a number of subjects. I just had the same discussion with Dr. Mary Clifton, who I've mentioned to you in previous private conversations. about the disconnect in and you and I have talked about this as well, what is taught in the medical schools and what isn't, and also, of course, what your priorities are from the standpoint of treating people. Let's say she gave an example of her dean would say, listen, if people are in pain, it's your duty to make sure and relieve them of pain. And my response was, well, it would be nice if the dean also would say, if people are in pain, it's your duty to know all the ways to treat them for pain. Mm-hmm. And the schools do that. And, of course, that she agreed. It's an interesting dynamic. And I want to stop you there for a second, because you and I have talked many times about these things. So this is a comfortable discussion for us in that regard. One of my, I hate the fact that they call it the endocannabinoid system, because when you talk about it to the layperson, you say that word, they think you're going to run to them and say, hey, you want to smoke a joint type of thing. Mm-hmm. And not the full, it's like I would prefer it if they would have called it the receptor system or something else without that connection. And it seems to be, even as we know that the regular medical institutions are not teaching this to the degree that they teach so many other things yet.
Right.
But from the disconnect where, you as a doctor, you're trying to teach that, I want you to tell people what the endocannabinoid system is and why they should know about it and why it's so important to them. Let's touch on that.
That's great. I'm really glad you went there. And so the endocannabinoid system is really what it means in, I think it's Latin, which is the inside cannabinoid system. So it's our own body's cannabinoid system that is probably hundreds of millions of years old, evolved throughout time. It's in many, many, many animals. And it's a system of receptors that are called, the two main ones being CB1 and CB2. And then these receptors receive endocannabinoids, which are like one of them is called, the main ones are called anandamide, and another main one is, there's so many of them, but anandamide being one of the most important. And so these endocannabinoid molecules are made by our bodies. We make them in response probably to lots of different things, but they're very hard to measure because they break down in our bodies very quickly. So, but we do know that they're important, and we do know that the body has a system that's naturally built in for not only receiving signals from cannabinoids, like cannabinoids we ingest into our bodies from the outside, or ones we make ourselves, but we also make them. So there's clearly an evolutionary reason why this system exists. And I think what's even more fascinating is that not only is there an evolutionary reason for it, it's critically important for our survival and our functioning. And there are an enormous number of studies to show that. I believe the CB1 knockout mice did not survive birth. It was so important, the cannabinoid system. It was fundamental for survival. But that's because the CB1 receptor in particular is I think it's the single most common G protein coupled receptor in all living things. So that means that of its kind, of its variety, and I could be wrong on this, it may not be the most common, but it's one of the most common. Sure. But it's in all living things. CB1 is one of the most common of this complex kind of receptor that is known to be involved in the learning process.
So essentially, what has been happening for however long, let's just say in the United States, we'll just keep it at home. We have been in a situation where we're being deprived of something that we naturally need. I tell people a lot of the time, speaking of THC just for a second, it says, okay, well, for me, all use is medicinal, because it's no different than drinking orange juice. All drinking of orange juice, real orange juice, has vitamin C in it. You're taking things in that your body needs at whatever level. And with the situation that we're in with prohibition relative to CBD, and we'll stay there, we are in a situation where we're depriving our bodies and other aspects of society of something that we need. And I think that message, your explanation, and that message is so important here to get past the stigma and the confusion that's going on. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's exactly why we created the Board of Medicine, is that starting with CBD, CBD is incredibly effective for a lot of things. And maybe we don't know exactly how it works best for what medical condition yet or what symptoms, and that's fine. We'll get there, right? You know, everything takes time with studies and this kind of thing.
Sure.
But the point is that it works and it's safe. And when you're looking at safety is so critical. You know, I think when we look at things, you mentioned the pain scale earlier, you know, and I think that it's critical that we do treat people's pain, but we do treat it in the right way. Right. And like you said, and when treating it in the right way is, as Hippocrates and Maimonides said, which is do no harm first.
Right. Harm reduction. Reduction.
If I give you something now that reduces your pain now, in exchange for making it worse in the future, and then giving you all these other side effects, like constipation in the case of opioids, right? And then addiction even. And I put you at risk for that kind of situation to treat something like chronic back pain, right? Which is actually, opioids are not indicated for long-term chronic back pain. They're not indicated for long-term prescription. They're indicated for short bursts, for acute pain.
Right.
And so they get overprescribed for the long-term stuff. And people, I think the patients really, they want relief. Everybody wants relief. But they don't understand the risk that they're taking when they start taking these medicines, because the doctor is handing it to them.
Right.
And the doctor's writing the prescription and the pharmacist is handing to them. There's a whole institution set up to provide these services to the public. And there are certain diagnoses that these work really great for. That said, for people who have chronic conditions, we're doing them as physicians, we're doing them an incredible disservice by providing them things like opioid narcotics for chronic pain instead of trying good quality CBD products first. Part of the problem is it's not known in large part which CBD products are good and which aren't. And that is a legitimate problem. And so what we're doing as the Board of Medicine is, we as a group of physicians, as a united front, who understand that not all CBD is good, but pure CBD processed in the proper way, that is organic, non-GMO, and doesn't have heavy metals or solvents in there, actually fantastic for a lot of things.
Right. And that is so important.
Right. And those are the critical things. And that's the same things that actually should apply to all medicines and probably to food, right? Anything we're putting into our bodies. And so we're as a nonprofit, we are coming together as a united front of physicians and saying, hey guys, look, we understand the situation, but if you really want to overcome this opioid crisis that we're in right now, and you actually want to overcome it, the answer is right in front of us. Here it is. It's CBD. It's not necessarily going to solve the entire opioid crisis, but it's going to start things off in the right direction.
And again, regardless of that, as important of a subject matter that is, let's say you had the person who had an opioid problem, of whatever, physical addiction, whatever situation it is, even if the CBD didn't necessarily work to change that, it's still making the body healthy. It's feeding the things that our body needs on top of that, and without the side effects. It's interesting that you mentioned the constipation thing. I'm sure you've had the same reactions. I don't know, it was like 3-4 years ago, and I'm watching television, and it's the first time I saw the advertisement for a narcotic to battle the side effects of another narcotic, and of course I fell out of my chair. And you watch these pharmaceutical companies, and whenever you see one, the majority of the commercial talks about the side effects. If you actually timed it, you would see that the majority of what they're talking about is the harm that could be caused by the taking of it and the dangers of it, as opposed to what it does. That's a quick 10 seconds or whatever it is. And it's crazy what we've allowed to happen in this country, and what is, like I said, you have, I'm sure, plenty of discussions. We have discussions about when we talk about this subject, and well, does the FDA say it's okay? My doctor says this, and what about this pharmaceutical company? They went through these trials, and so if they say that the oxycodone can go to an 11-year-old, that should be fine. And I just, I facepalm. We are so indoctrinated to not ask questions, I guess, is the thing. We don't have the we have so many people who are not questioning what's going in their body. Doctor gives you something, it's nothing. Oh, my doctor gave it to me. Well, that's not good enough.
Right.
You know, and I mentioned the CBD thing earlier, and so I when I lost my patience with them again, the FDA, it was the state of Oregon, which runs its medicinal cannabis industry with the Liquor Control Board. It's fine, same thing with the state of Washington. And so they refused to allow CBD-infused alcoholic beverages because the FDA hasn't done any studies to say what the reactions would be with different drugs, this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, really, we're still there? Why are we still there? You know, because of prohibition mainly. But, you know, it's to me, it's absurd. Talk a little bit about
We're going to be there because it's a political issue.
Yes, of course.
I mean, I think that it's important to just accept and recognize that that is what is happening and then figure out what to do with it about it afterwards, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it is a political issue. It's not about how well it works. You know, there's a lot of misinformation about it. There's a lot of bad products out there. There are 1,600 different CBD companies out there.
Yeah.
Each one probably makes more than one product.
Right.
That's an enormous amount of products. Each one of those companies says that they're the best in their marketing.
Yep.
How are anybody supposed to know what to do, you know, or what to use or how to use it? I mean, it's just so crazy. It's clear that that's not the case, but I think it's also really important to note that that cannabinoids are really complicated in general, not from a lack of safety perspective. From a lack of safety perspective, they're like a gift from God. But I mean, they are safe. They're like one of our safest, best medicines that we have, and they require almost no processing to take from the flower on the herb that's fresh grown to actually processing that and drying it and using it as a medicine in any capacity. It takes almost no effort. The whole thing is so simple as a way to help us heal in a very positive way.
Plant medicine.
It can't kill you.
Right. Exactly. What are they protecting us from? Exactly. It is.
But I think it's complicated. I think the cannabis is complicated for good and for bad. It's good for science, and it's good for us to be able to figure out how to use cannabis and optimize it the best as possible. Sure. I think we'll probably find in the long term that with cannabis and science together, we will treat a ton of things better that we never thought we could. Sure. And that's going to be super exciting for us as doctors in the next 20 years. That said, I think that it's scary to the government. It's scary to the DEA, the FDA, partially because there's so many different cannabinoids. Yeah. And so, you know, how do you, like, the effects, like this, like cannabis is really going to be landmark in terms of the way that it's coming through legality, mainly because it is a full spectrum plant medicine at its best, right? Like there are not a lot of other plants that we use in Western medicine where we use the entire thing, because the entire plant is better than just one little part from what we can tell. Usually, at least from the stuff we use, it's like a minuscule difference. Medicine is very good at reductionist and breaking it down to the most like tiniest thing that is most likely to have the biggest effect. But it turns out, especially with cannabis and probably with many other medicines, plant medicines, that having the whole plant is critical to having the best impact.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And again, it emphasized, as you mentioned, no one dies from its ingestion. And that is so as scary and legitimate, of course, what you're describing, like with the government, the DEA, the FDA, et cetera. There's still that to fall back on in the sense of, okay, guys, we need to move this along. And obviously, one of the reasons why you exist is because they're not moving it along. One of the reasons why I exist in this particular space is because they're not moving it along. You know, without going anywhere near the other issues, this one alone is the world changer. If they would just let it loose and pour into it what they pour into oxycodone. I mean, just pick a drug, you know, that they just funnel this money in. And I mean, the National Institute of Health, which everybody, you know, I shouldn't say everybody, but so many people are like, well, the National Institute of Health says, and you know, you and I want to strangle them. I mean, come on, guys. You know, I mean, you know what I'm saying.
I think it's going to come no matter what. It's just
it has to.
It's just a matter of time, you know. And I think I think what's interesting is that cannabis has inspired a lot of other wonderful things in our lives,
Right.
and it's contributed to a healing in a lot of different ways for a lot of people, and it's inspired so much good. I can tell you without a doubt that my studies of cannabis medicine and the way that cannabis works with safety as one of the critical aspects and balancing of the endocannabinoid system was actually critical to the way that we developed Apollo, because Apollo and I'm the chief and also the chief innovation officer and co-founder of Apollo Neuroscience, where we develop non-invasive treatments that don't have any side effects, that use natural techniques combined with technology, in this case vibration that you feel, to be able to change the balance of the autonomic nervous system, which is responsible for, or at the core of a lot of our general dysfunction in our lives, is oftentimes due to an imbalance between the sympathetic system, our fight flight system, rest and digest parasympathetic system. So the endocannabinoid system, going back to that, which is critical for regulating the balance between these systems. The endocannabinoid system, when we activate it, seems to increase parasympathetic tone, which is our recovery system. It was responsible for digestion, creativity, sleep, reproduction. I said digestion, creativity, sleep, reproduction, all energy, recovery, metabolism, immunity, all the stuff that our body does when we are not stressed out or running from a lion.
Right.
And then the sympathetic
that things are flowing properly. It's almost like it works almost in the same concept as like chiropractic medicine, where it's opening up your body to things in the wellness capacity, where it's putting your body back in place where things are flowing naturally, the way they're supposed to be. That's kind of what you're mentioning here, just to give people an analogy.
It's bringing the body back into balance. And there's lots of techniques to do this, and many of them are very ancient, like yoga, breath work, meditation, mindfulness practices. All of these things are ancient techniques for bringing the body and teaching ourselves to bring the body back into balance as often as possible, which helps us to get that much closer to being our full potential, our best selves as often as possible. And so cannabis and cannabinoids, because the endocannabinoid system is so fundamental to that, cannabinoids from the outside are also likely to be really important contributors to helping us maintain that inner balance, and helping us reestablish and reinforce that inner balance. And psychedelic medicines are also likely to be an important part of that.
Right. That's fantastic. So Dr. David Rabin, thank you so much for round one. We have many more to go. I'm so happy that we're doing this. I appreciate your time as always, and tell everybody where they can find you. Mention again the Board of Medicine, of course, but let everybody know where they can find you.
Sure. And thanks again, Bobby. I really appreciate it. And you can find me at my website, drdave.io. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Rabin, or on Instagram at Dr. David Rabin. And you can find me also through Apollo at apolloneuro.com, APOLLONEURO.com, and Apollo on Instagram, Apollo on Twitter, Apollo Neuro on Twitter, etc. And the boardofmedicine.org as well is our nonprofit that you can find, and we're actually launching that very excitedly over the next 6 months. So stay tuned for more from the board, because you'll be hearing about us in some of your local media probably.
Oh, a lot more than that, because I'll make sure of it all by myself, as you know. Always a pleasure, David. I'll be seeing you. We'll come back at you, everybody, next week. Thank you, David.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bobby. Take care.
Dr. David Rabin, walk the number 4 change.us. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and I'll see you next time.